Hey everybody, I'm losing light here, Rick, so I'm going to try to do this. I just got asked online. I was putting a post up. There's been a lot of debate regarding billets and the lack thereof in the archaeological record as used in the I almost said traditional, I mean in modern times, the traditional time of flint knapping, that you're using your leg, you're taking a billet, and you're freehand striking out in front of you, whatever. And we're not finding in the archaeological record the use on the end of those type of billets. Particularly, I mean, here's one of mine, a moose billet, and I grew accustomed to using my my wood billets, and so recently I've kind of given that up, and so I haven't really been using billets because I've been pursuing my my fixed my pivot and swivel and or pivot and fixed insert press process, and so my efforts have been going into that. So I really haven't had the need for using those billets. However, in doing research and everything, I did want to make and point out that there are pieces in the archaeological record, even wood, and I'm demonstrating with the fixed insert process that wood is effective on flints, and depending on what type of woods, and that has a variation to play. But also I'm picking up that this tool, and I've demonstrated this over some time as well, flat piece of antler or wood, depending on the hardness. It's just kind of a natural thing for me because I use flat stones in my bifacing. I use hammer stones, round, but I also like to use flat ones as well, and I've demonstrated before using a piece of leather on the outside wrapped like this, using it in this manner, but also using the hammer stone in a glancing blow to the side, and you'll find it generates a lot of pressure. Now the stone, hard stone, I'll use this method a lot of times for truing up with stone along the edge in shaping, but you have to watch to make sure that it isn't putting a lot of bulbs along the side, depending on what you're following up with on what type of tool. So I also do the same thing with antler, and so you can take these round pieces, and I gave an example of some pieces that I'm coming across in the archaeological record, to where you're seeing consistent use along the edges that I recognize, and so you can use this in this manner to drive off your flakes. You can see it's popping those off nicely. Oh, I just lost that one, but there you can see it's taking out. Now, let me pick up, see if I got any bigger pieces for driving longer flakes. So you can use that. You can use this end here to where you're holding it, and it's just kind of a glancing blow. And you can come in as well. So I would call this kind of like a paddle. You can come in as well, and as it's blowing down, it will drive off longer flakes. Kind of out of practice with it right now, but you can see I've got a real big ridge right here off of this flake that I've got. So I can trim effectively with it as well. Let me try to get a good flake for you here, doing that I was describing. Well, there's some that ran, so shoot, I lost that. But anyways, you can see right here running over this way. So with practice, coming in and a glancing blow down. Now I want to pick up something as well on this thing going around of saying billets weren't used. Well, we may not be finding them with the use on the end. There are some that were thought to be billet 10,000, 15,000 years old. I pointed out was reclassified, and as they're finding out, doing analysis, that it was actually a mortar for grinding up in a piece of turtle shell paints used in burial. So originally they were thinking it was a flint napper, the billet, the oldest billet discovered. These things are falling apart as far as the use on the end with the traditional hammering, and I believe that's because of this new process that I've stumbled upon. There isn't the need for it. Now, I will say that using your striker, this as a striker for my fixed insert process, say like taking one of the insert tools here like this. So now I'm turning this around here, and I'm striking, taking off my pieces with this in the indirect percussion. I do see on some of the pieces sometimes that glancing blow, just like this, of using this also coming in, and the drag. And this is some of the things that I was pointing out before with looking at those punches, looking at the scarring that's going on for indirect percussion. You're not taking a pointed piece and handing indirect percussion, so those get off of the table. But the same process of that, except it'd be running in the opposite direction. That grazing along the side leaves those trails. So in indirect percussion, if you take these cylinders, I believe they're used in different manners. I believe that you could have it for fixed insert process like this, where you're hitting on the corner, and as you're doing, the scarring is going like this. It isn't chipping pieces off as if you were taking this and hitting directly onto a sharpened surface, because that would just chisel and flake off those pieces. Now, as I've demonstrated in the past before with taking the with the hand pad, wrapping it around your micro, now you have a micro stone billet. Your fingers are out of the way. It's a small, precise tool that you can use for direct percussion. You can also use it for indirect percussion, for pulling against the platform, loading pressure, and then striking, and then you get those grazing downward scars. Now you transfer that over to the little, I call them Vienna sausages, the little sausage punches, drifts, whatever, that are all over the place in archaeological record. You do the same thing. You're able to then pull a small tool to where your fingers are not in the way, to where you're trying to hold it with your hand. Believe me, you get hit a few times in the back of your hand with a billet strike, or you're trying to break off some flint, you'll get the idea real quick that that's not a wise process. As well as doing it that way, your chips are going to be coming. You're going to be slicing this because it's cutting. You're taking a sharp surface like this, and you can look at it one way, you're trying to get a flake off, or you could look at it the other way. If you were trying to sharpen this tool to a point, you could take this, punch it, and it's going to drive this off, and you could sharpen a wedge, which we do have. I mean, you do it that way. You can wedge this tool, and then you're just grinding a little bit because you shaved off that side, and that's how you can effectively make a wedge tool. is by chopping it. So I don't believe that was an effective process, and they knew that. They weren't wanting to spend all kinds of time on their tools. This tool needs minimal truing working on flints. So, so I believe that this, if it was used in indirect percussion, was setting the piece on a anvil that is a diagonal anvil, putting your hand on the back of it and pulling this into pressure against this, loading it, pulling it to you, and then pow, indirect pressure, and then it grazes this side, causing the characteristics we see on some of these. So I believe these tools were used in a couple different manners in this whole system. Thank you.